More redox, synthesis and decomposition reactions. Combination reactions, or another word for it is synthesis. Synthesis is a type of redox reaction where two elements or compounds form into a single compound. Here are some examples. One type of synthesis reaction is when an element, such as barium, combines with oxygen to produce barium oxide. So this is also considered, since it has oxygen, it's also considered to be a combustion reaction. So combustion reactions can be also synthesis. Here are two more examples. For example, if you take a metal and you react it with a non-metal, often a salt is formed, such as this case, where we take sodium and we mix it with gaseous chlorine to make sodium chloride. Sometimes we can make hydroxides if we take metals that are combined with oxygen and mix it with water, and hydroxide is produced, such as this case, which would be copper 2 hydroxide. All these have two things in common. They both have two reactants and one product. Other examples of synthesis reaction is the copper in the Statue of Liberty, and it reacts with the oxygen and air to form this green copper 2 oxide. Another reaction that you've seen before is the reaction that produces rust. When we take iron and we mix it with oxygen, it forms iron 3 oxide. And here's the balanced equation. Again, noting that there's two reactants and one product. Now, let's take the reverse, decomposition. Decomposition is when you take a compound and you break it into simpler substances. For example, if we take this mercury oxide and this compound is broken down into its elements, we get mercury and oxygen as products. Another example would be taking an acid and decomposing it into, for example, this would be sulfuric acid. It would decompose into sulfur trioxide and water. Another type is when you take a metal carbonate and you heat it up, and it breaks down into carbon dioxide and a metal oxide or calcium oxide here. Now, what you should be taking from this is basically decomposition starts with one reactant and it forms two or more products. And the two or more products are the simpler substances. Here's an example that you've seen before in soda. So how they add the carbon dioxide in soda is basically they add this carbonic acid, and when carbonic acid heats, it produces carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so this is the formation of all these little bubbles here, okay, which is the carbon dioxide being exposed to the heat and thus escaping into the atmosphere. Now, since synthesis and decomposition reactions are redox, or oxidation reduction, the driving force of all redox is the transfer of electrons. So, for example, we have this reaction here. I want you to find the oxidizing and reducing agent. So go ahead and pause the video and assign oxidation numbers. Okay, we're back. So go ahead and check your answers. So right here, anything that's by itself has an oxidation number of 0. So that goes for oxygen as well. Iron is going to have a plus 3, and oxygen is going to have a minus 2 charge. So your job right now is to figure out which went up in charge and which one went down in charge. Iron went up. it went from 0 to +3, therefore it's oxidized, and therefore it's the reducing agent. Finally, oxygen went from 0 to -2, so went down in charge, therefore it's reduced, and therefore it's the oxidizing agent. Your task right now is to work on the two worksheets, the synthesis and decomposition worksheets that you got in class or online.